Today, we're going to wrap up our Blessed Hope series. So, we've been talking about this since Easter. Can you believe it's already been a month since Easter? It's kind of crazy to think, right? It feels like it was just here yesterday. Time goes by quickly, huh? So, we kicked this off on Easter and we talked about hope in Jesus. We talked about his resurrection and return. How we have hope now and in the future return. And then we talked about hope in heaven and how awesome and glorious it's going to be in heaven, and how we have so much to look forward to. And sometimes we get lost in this life and the things of this life, and we lose sight of the glorious heaven that we have to look forward to. And then a couple of weeks ago, we talked about being ready. We talked about getting your tickets by knowing Jesus. And we talked about packing your bags by being obedient to Jesus and serving him. And so we're going to kind of continue that theme as we wrap up today about being ready. But we're going to take a little bit different angle this morning. We're going to talk about getting busy, because sometimes we can get complacent or we can get distracted, and so we want to get busy being about the Father's business, because that's what is important for us to be ready for his return, or when he calls us home, is to be about his business and be focused on him and his kingdom. So I want to start out talking about time. How do you think about time? It goes by fast. Yeah, it does go by fast. I was just talking about it, right? Time. Sometimes we think we have a lot of time. Have you ever had those? Maybe you're sitting and you're trying to figure out, how do I pass the time? How do I make the time go by faster? Because I'm just sitting around waiting for something, right? Maybe you're looking forward to something, or maybe you never feel like you got enough time. You're always running out of time. Everywhere you go, you don't have enough time to get to doing what you want to do, how you want to do it. Maybe you look at it as a gift. If you think about it, God gifted us with time, a certain amount of time. Or maybe you think about it as an investment. How am I investing my time? How am I using that time or using that gift in that? So, how do you think God views time? Because I was going through that, and I'm thinking we talk about time a lot, right? Because at the end of the day, we have a finite amount of time in this life. God's given us a finite amount of time. Nobody's living in this life forever, right? Nobody's getting out of this life alive, right? We're going to be transitioned to a greater life, and we are alive in Christ in that. But this body is going to be done away with at some point in time. This life, we have a finite amount of time and purpose in this life. But if you think about it from God's perspective, time is not something he probably takes into consideration. I mean, timing of things, absolutely, but time as a quantity, because he has no constraint on time, right? The reason why we think so much about time is because we do have a limited quantity of time. God doesn't have a limited quantity of time. And so it's kind of baffling to think about how his perspective of time is so different from ours, and how we consider that. The one thing I will share is God is a whole lot more interested in your future than your past. And so, depending on how you've used your time and how you've maybe invested your time, and God's perspective on how you've used your time specifically in your life, the great news is He is interested in where we're going from today forward. He's not interested in what yesterday had for us, what we did or didn't do. Sure, we want to learn from that, we want to grow from that, but at the end of the day, He's with us going forward. And that's where His focus is, and that's where our focus is. How do you want to use the time you have? So, a challenging question for you is, when's the last time you shared Jesus with somebody? When's the last time that you've looked for an opportunity to share the gospel, led someone to Christ, or just shared it in a way that they opened up their heart to surrender to Christ? When's the last time when you met a new person, you met them with compassion for where is their heart at? Do they know Jesus? Are you considering where their eternal security is? Do they have hope in Jesus? Do they have hope in a heaven? Or do they have no hope at all? It's important for us to be thinking about those things and thinking, as we have time, we all have a finite amount of time, every one of us. And how are we using that time? Are we using it for God's kingdom, or are we using it for our own kingdom? There's an old movie. Well, I say old. It was in the 90s, but it was an older movie about this kid. It's called Blank Check, if anybody's seen it. But this kid, basically, he got this check that this guy wrote out to him, no amount filled out to it. So he filled it out for $1 million. And for some crazy reason, only in the 90s that this would happen because it wouldn't happen today. He was able to go cash that check for $1 million. And this kid, 11-year-old boy, has 11 million or $1 million to go spend. And so what does he do? I mean, he goes buys everything else an 11-year-old would want, right? He gets a mansion, he gets all these things, he does all this stuff with it. And one of the main turning points in the movie is when he finds out his bank account's empty. He's gone and just squandered the whole $1 million. He's got all this stuff, but he finds himself alone. Finds himself alone and no money. And he's just squandered all of that great gift that he received in that. And ultimately, we can do the same thing with the time that God's given to us. We can go squander it. We can start out life thinking, I've got all of this. I got all the time in the world. I'll take care of that later. And then we get towards the end and we find out we squandered it. We didn't use it effectively. We don't want Jesus to return and feel that same way of being, I squandered it, I used it, it's all used up, and I'm all alone. We have to look for opportunities to share Jesus everywhere. It has to be part of our life. It has to be part of our heart, right? You have to have like the eyes to see. You've got to have those, just not that you're like hunting. I mean, that's a little bit different, right? You're going out and you're trying to get people. No, that's not how it is. You're just aware constantly. The other day, I went to go get a haircut. And I'm sitting there, and the gal cutting my hair, starting a conversation, chatting about things, and this was just a few weeks ago. And she's like, "Hey, what do you got going on this weekend?" And I was telling her, I was like, "Well, I've got a wedding that I'm going to, and then I'm going to a graduation ceremony." And she's like, "Well, who's graduating?" I was like, "Well, actually, it's me." I was like, "I'm actually getting credentialed as a minister." And she was like, "Oh, really? That's exciting." And we were talking about it, and so then I was just like, "Well, where do you go to church, or do you go to church anywhere?" And she's like, "Well, I haven't gone in a while, and I used to." Um, and I was telling her that this that my ceremony was going to be at Reach Church in Des Moines. It used to be the old First Assembly in Des Moines. She was like, "That's where I used to go. I haven't been there in forever, but that's the place that I went." She was like, "Do you know Pastor Dave?" I was like, "I actually do know Pastor Dave, but not from going there. But it was Dave B. Roth that was here." How wild is that, right? And so it's just one of those where, and so I was able to connect with her. I want to encourage her, hey, go check it out, get back connected. And but how neat is that of God, out of all the people and all the places that we could be, to have that conversation there. And it's just constantly having that outward perspective of, what are you thinking about when you meet somebody for the first time? Are you looking for opportunities to be able to share your faith, to share the hope that we have in Jesus? Or are you just looking to try to get past them so you can get on to whatever it is that you're doing? We have to be thinking about, how are we using our time? In John 9:4, it says, "We must work the works of him who sent me as long as it is day. Night is coming when no one can work." There will be a day when there's no work to be done. That day isn't today. We have to work as long as it's day, and it's still day until Jesus returns or calls us home. So you have to ask yourself, where am I going to be when Jesus returns? What am I going to be doing? Right? Are we going to be, is Jesus going to come back and we're in the middle of, you know, worried about how we're going to accomplish our next, feat, or, how we're going to get to the next potluck, or, whatever it is that we got going on that keeps us busy. For me, maybe it's, I'm worried about maintenance I'm doing on my dirt bike or something, right? Like, am I worried about that, or am I worried, is he going to come back and find me being about the Father's business? Are we going to be focused on our own business, or we're going to focus on nothing? Because there's also the spirit of laziness that we can have. Unfortunately, TV consumes a lot of time. It's an easy way to pass the time, right? That's just one. I mean, video games. I don't know how many of you may be into video games, but my kids use a lot. They spend a lot of time on video games. I did. I enjoy it every once in a while. And it's not that we don't get rest. That's not what I'm talking about. But what's the driver? What's consuming most of it? How are we spending our time or investing our time? Because I look at time as an investment. It was a gift that was given to us. How are we investing that time into God's kingdom? So we have to be on guard against distractions, busyness. You know, one of the main answers when somebody says, "Hey, how you doing?" Busy. I'm busy. Right? Like, it's almost a competition of like, can I prove that I'm more busy than you are? Right? You start listing off all the things and they're telling you all the things that they're doing, and man, I'm busy. Right? Maybe you're on the other end, is maybe you're like, I got nothing going on. I'm bored to death. you know? What are you doing? I'm watching TV. Oh, watching the time go by, right? It's different for each of us, different on different stages of life. Right now, I have 4 teenagers. Life is busy, right? I got 2 jobs. It's a good time, right? It's busy. But that's not my focus. When somebody asks how I'm doing, I want to talk to them. I want to be positive. I want to look for an opportunity to share what God's doing in my life and how he's using me to hopefully inspire and encourage them on how God could be using them for what his kingdom purposes are. It's easy for us to fall into the things of this world and get focused on that. The enemy wants us to do that. Or maybe we get caught up in our own ambitions of all those things. I've been there for many years. I'm fairly successful in my career. And I will tell you, I focused on that way too much for way too many years. I had a friend of mine, he said, you can choose to live to work or work to live. And yeah, it's a challenging thought. And of course, in his context, this was in a corporate world, and he wanted me to live to work. And I'm like, I'm not playing that game. I'm going to work to live because there's a whole lot more to life than just work. But that is a challenge in the corporate space. Where's your focus? Sometimes we will choose even good works over God. There's a concept of good or God. Just because something is good, inherently good, doesn't mean that God's in it. There are many times where we can get really busy being about work in a church. We can be serving all over the place, keeping ourselves extremely busy, and realize that God's not with us. It's a slippery slope. Those aren't bad things necessarily. But if God's not there with you, you're just being busy. That's not the wise use of the time. Have you ever left a kid in charge of something, find out they didn't get it done when you got back? I mean, maybe that's only my kids that do that, but there's a lot of times they're like, hey, make sure the yard's mown when I get home. Right? Nah, you know, I was just going out to do that, Dad. I'm sure you were, right? Hey, why is the dishwasher not unloaded? Right? We told you 3 times, make sure the dishwasher's unloaded. Never happens unless we're there to tell them, right? But maybe that's how God feels about us sometimes. He's like, hey, I've got things I need you to go do. And we're like, oh, I'll take care of that later. Don't worry, he's not coming back for a little. I got some time, right? I got time before he comes back. I don't need to unload the dishwasher. So I tell you a story. In the late 1800s, off the coast of North Carolina, the Cape Hatteras Lighthouse stood as a guardian against the treacherous waters known as the graveyard of the Atlantic. One foggy night, a new assistant keeper was assigned to tend the lamp while the head keeper was away. He meant well, but got distracted. He began polishing the brass railings. He cleaned the floor. He even spent time organizing the oil cabinet, thinking, I'll tend the light in just a moment. But the moment passed. He never trimmed the wick. He didn't refuel the lamp. And as the fog thickened and the night fell, the light went out. Hours later, a ship struck reef just off the coast. Several sailors drowned before help could reach them. The tragedy was traced back to the one thing that wasn't done, the one job that mattered most. And so the point of this is that it wasn't evil things that caused the failure, it was distractions. He was busy, he was just not faithful. There's a difference. We can be busy but not faithful. He did the lesser things while neglecting the more important things. So it's not that you might be doing anything wrong or spending your time wrong, but if you're not tending your lamp, if you're not watching for the master's return, then someone around you might be drifting into darkness and getting lost because we're not focused on the right things, because we're busy about the wrong things. So we have to ask ourselves, are we tending the light? Are we focused on how we're investing that time? Or are we just polishing the brass, cleaning the floors? Or are we just biding our time? Maybe we're taking a nap. We got to ask ourselves, how are we using that time? So in Matthew 24:38 and 39, it says, for as in those days before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage until the day that Noah entered the ark. And they did not understand until the flood came and took them all away. So will the coming of the Son of Man be. It's very easy to get distracted and think, hey, everything's great. It's all wonderful. Hey, let's just go party. Let's go have a good time and forget about what God's called us to do and lose focus on what God's called us to do. And he's going to show up when we don't think he will. And if we're not focused on the right things, he's going to show up and surprise us all. So we got to get busy about the Father's business. Matthew 24:42 through 44. It says, "Therefore, be on the alert, for you do not know which day your Lord is coming. But be sure of this, if the head of the house had known at what time the night the thief was coming, he would have been on the alert and would not have allowed his house to be broken into. For this reason, you also must be ready, for the Son of Man is coming at an hour when you do not think he will." We have to live in a sense of urgency and expectancy of him coming, and we have to get busy. So 1 Corinthians 15:58 says, "Therefore, my beloved brethren, be steadfast, immovable, always abounding in the work of the Lord, knowing that your toil is not in vain in the Lord." So the two things that we need to make sure when we get busy is we got to get busy about the Father's business. Just from this verse, it says, abounding in the work of the Lord. So we have to think in our time, are we abounding in the work of the Lord? Or are we abounding in our own ambitions? Or are we being lazy? And the second thing is we have to not grow weary in that mission and in that purpose. In this verse, it talks about being steadfast and saying your toil is not in vain in the Lord. I think many times we're not willing to go all in, right? We're not willing to put all of our chips on what God's called us to do just in case we miss out on something or just in case we aren't able to do what we want to do. But he's specifically reminding us here is our toil is not in vain in the Lord. If we keep our focus and purpose on him, if we're abounding in the work of the Lord, there's a reward for us, and it's heaven, and it's amazing, and it's awesome. But we can get so distracted from the things in this world. So we're going to break this down a little bit. So the first one, focusing on God's purpose. This is what we've been talking about in the introduction here. But it's not about our own agenda. It's not our own preferences. Many times the enemy wants us to get distracted about what do we care about? What is my opinion on how this is working? What do I want this to be? We see it in churches all the time, right? Oh, I don't, I like this kind of worship. I like that kind of worship, right? Oh, this isn't the way I want to do it. Hey, that pastor preaches different than I like it. We have to ask ourselves, is that what we want to be found when Jesus comes back? That's what we're worried about? That's what we got to be ready. If we want to be ready for his return, we need to be focused on God's purposes, not our own purposes. There's an interesting story, and I'm not going to go into it too much, but when Jesus was very young, and they went to Jerusalem and they went in the temple, and then the parents started leaving, and they were, a couple days journey out. And they didn't realize Jesus wasn't there, but that's because of the way they traveled at that time. They traveled in these like caravans, and usually it was kind of more of a community. And so they turned around and they went back to go find Jesus, and he's in the temple. And how he responded to him, Luke 2:49, and he said to them, "Why did you seek me? Did you not know that I must be about my Father's business?" And so for him, in his mind, it was so clear he wasn't being disobedient to his parents. He wasn't trying to make them look bad. He was like, I have a purpose. I have a very clear purpose. And you should, out of all people, as my parents, should know that I'm going to live on purpose and on mission for what God's put me here. So we're going to dive into one of Jesus's parables. Is anybody familiar with the parable of the talents? Right? And we're going to go through the whole thing. So if you haven't done this, or if you haven't read it before, I'm going to walk through it a little bit. What was interesting to me as I was going through this, the parable of the talents is a fairly well known parable, but it's actually in the middle of Jesus teaching about his return. Many times we kind of think about it just kind of generically speaking, but it's right in the middle of him speaking about the end times. So most of the series, we've been going through Matthew 24 and 25. And so if you want kind of an overview of what we've been going through the last few weeks, read Matthew 24 and 25. It covers almost everything that we've been talking about. And that's really where the basis, a lot of this is. And I've been pulling in scriptures from other parts of the Bible to kind of give you a more full perspective of how this all comes together. But ultimately, this is Jesus's teaching on the end times, because it starts out and the disciples are like, Jesus is walking along with them, and they're walking through the temples, and he's like, not one stone's going to be left on top of another. And so his disciples are like, "You're going to give us a heads up? Like, tell us, give us the inside scoop, right? Tell us about this. How's this going to go down?" And so he goes into all of 24 and 25, and he talks about all these things that are happening. He goes into the end times and he talks about there's going to be deceivers that come and there's going to be wars and rumors of wars. Have we experienced any of that so far? There's all kinds of that happening. There's going to be famine and earthquakes. We see that happening now too. There's persecution, there's apostasy. If you're not familiar with the word apostasy, that means when somebody has a relationship with Jesus and they intentionally turn and walk away from God and they choose not to follow him. It's not that they drift away, they just straight up choose to walk the other way. And that's going to happen in the end times. The people will fall away from God. We're seeing that happen today. Now, when is he return? I don't know, but I mean, I'm seeing the leaves shaking, right? We're seeing some of those things happening. There's going to be false prophets that come out. People are going to be living carelessly as in the days of Noah, as we just read a little bit ago. We got to know the times and be ready. That is the intent of Matthew 24. And then Matthew 25, it goes into a couple of different parables. The first one, he talks about the 10 virgins, and basically there's 5 that are ready for him to return, and the other 5 aren't ready. And then when he shows up, it's too late for the other 5 that weren't ready. So he's saying, you got to be ready. And we talked a lot about that a couple of weeks ago about you've got to be ready personally. You got to know him and you got to be obedient to him. We got to surrender to him. That's part of being ready. But then he goes in to the parable of the talents. And so I thought it was interesting to just kind of give a little bit of background on where we are and what Jesus is teaching as he comes into this parable, because sometimes we can take these parables and read them just on their own and we can forget the context that's going on around them and what's happening and what is Jesus' message that he's trying to teach here. So we just got done talking about how you need to be ready personally when he talked about the 10 virgins. But then he goes in Matthew 25, this is 13 through 30, so it's a little bit longer passage. I'm going to break this up into a few different sections. And it says, "Be on the alert then, for you do not know the day nor the hour, for it is like a man about to go on a journey who called his own slaves and entrusted his possessions to them. And to one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, and another 1, each according to his own ability, and he went on his journey." So let's stop there for just a second. He entrusted these possessions to these slaves. In this situation, the master is Jesus, and we are the slaves in that. That doesn't mean that we are slaves. He's just representing that in this parable. But what he's saying is he gave his own possessions. What possessions did God give us? What of his possessions did he give us? Have you ever thought about that? He gave us his possessions. That's what he's talking about here. He's given us life. He's given us gifts. He's given us the Holy Spirit. He's given himself to us. He's entrusted grace and blessings to us. But most importantly, he's also entrusted his people to us. That is part of it. How are we managing that time, that possession that he's given to us? So we'll continue on here. Immediately, the one who had received the 5 talents went and traded with them and gained 5 more talents. In the same manner, the one who had received the 2 talents gained 2 more, and the one who received 1 talent went away, dug a hole in the ground, and hid his master's money. Which one do you relate to more? Out of all the gifts and possessions that God's entrusted you with, have you gone and used those to build God's kingdom, or are we going and digging a hole and putting it in a hole and hiding from people? Are we busy about the Father's business or not? So we continue on in verse 19. It says, "Now, after a long time, the master of those slaves came and settled accounts with them. The one who had received the 5 talents came up and brought 5 more talents, saying to the master, You entrusted 5 talents to me. See, I have gained 5 more talents. His master said to him, Well done, good and faithful slave. You are faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Enter into the joy of your master." This was a servant that took the possessions of the master and went and did the master's purpose. He was about the Father's purpose in this. So if we make this about us, this is someone, we're blessed in certain ways. Each one of us has been given something according to how God created us and what he called us to do. And he's asking us to use that for his purposes, not our purposes. We're blessed in meals. I see people all the time in corporate world where they're using their God-given talents to go serve their own selfish desires. It's easy to fall into. We can all do those types of things, but God gave us that purpose to go use for his purposes. And I don't know about you, but when when Jesus comes back, I want to hear good and faithful slave, or actually what he's going to say is good and faithful child, because we're not slaves, we're children, children of God and fellow heirs with the king. So let's see, let's read on. So in verse 22, it says, also the one who had received 2 talents came and said, Master, you entrusted 2 talents to me. See, I have gained 2 more. His master said to him, well done, good and faithful slave. You are faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Enter into the joy of your master. Notice that it didn't matter. It wasn't about, hey, 5 versus 2 or how it used. It was that he was faithful with what God had put him in charge of, then used for God's purposes. So it's more about us being, it's not about us comparing each other. Many times we want to say, well, I want to, that person's doing better than me, or I'm doing better than that person. God doesn't care about that. He's not interested in us comparing each other to each other. That's not it. It's not about comparison. It's about us using and following through on what God's entrusted to us and the purpose that he's given us so we can go use it for his kingdom. Because at the end of the day, he's the one that causes the growth anyway. It's just us being faithful to follow after him. So we have to ask ourselves, are we being faithful about being busy about the Father's business? In the last slave, it says in verse 24, and to the one who had received the 1 talent came up and said, Master, I knew you to be a hard man, reaping where you did not sow and gathering where you scattered no seed. And I was afraid and went away and hid your talent in the ground. See, you have what is yours. This slave was more interested in not losing. He was scared to lose what he had been given instead of focusing on what he'd been purposed to do. Verse 26 continues, but his master answered and said to him, you wicked, lazy slave. You knew that I reap where I do not sow and gathered where I scattered no seed. Then you ought to have put my money in the bank, and on my arrival I would have received my money back with interest. Therefore, take away the talent from him and give it to the one who has 10 talents. For the one who has more, more shall be given, and he shall have an abundance. But from the one who does not have, even what he does shall be taken away. Throw out the worthless slave into the outer darkness. In that place there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. So God's entrusted these possessions to us. He's entrusted a purpose for us. He's entrusted us, and he wants to use us to build his kingdom. But if we just go and hide, it's not about losing it. It's not about, let me maybe be a little more direct. It's not about keeping my salvation. It's about using that to go be about the Father's kingdom so that other people can experience that salvation. But if we're just worried about our own salvation and just keeping that secure the whole time, we're missing what he's called us to do. We have to be about the Father's business. It's not just about us. It's about the Father and what he's doing in his greater kingdom. And he doesn't hold back. He has expectations upon his return. It's not like fire insurance. We don't say a prayer, get saved, and then get to do whatever we want. And when he shows up, we just give him our ticket. That's not how it works. He has expectations for us. He's given us a mission. But this requires us to be busy about the Father's business. He's given us each life in Jesus and a mission to share that life with others. We can't be empty-handed when he returns. So let's not waste the time we have left. Let's get busy. At the height of World War II, a theologian, Dietrich Bonhoeffer, was imprisoned for taking a stand against Hitler. Yet he continued to urge fellow believers to resist Nazi tyranny. A group of Christians, believing that Hitler was the Antichrist, asked him, why do you expose yourself to all this danger? Jesus will return any day, and all your work and suffering will be done for nothing. But yet he replied, if Jesus returns tomorrow, then tomorrow I'll rest from my labor. But today I have work to do. I must continue to struggle until it's finished. We all have to have that same attitude. We can't be like, well, it's got to be close to the end times. I'm just going to, mail it in from here on out. I'm going to coast. No, we have to be busy about the Father's business. So there's 3 different aspects about getting busy on this. We can't get distracted with the wrong things, the unimportant things. We have to keep focused on Him. Second, we can't get busy about our own business and our own ambitions. We have to be focused on His. We have to give up our desires for His desires. Matthew 6:33, it says, "But seek first His kingdom and His righteousness, and all these things will be added to you." We have to keep our focus on Him. It's easy to get distracted about our own. And third, don't be retired. There's no retirement in this mission. We got to get in the game. So whatever that is, getting the game may not look like it used to. That's fine. But you got to be in the game. You got to be focused on other people. You got to be praying for people, greeting others with a smile, embracing new ways to reach the next generation, inviting people to church, sharing Jesus, loving on people, meeting new people, taking care of others, giving, serving. The list goes on. There's work to do. We got to work while it's day. There is no retirement in this mission. Heaven is the ultimate retirement. There's no retirement in this life for this mission. But we can't grow weary. So that's the second point here today is we got to get busy about this, but let's not grow weary in the work that God's called us to do. We have to continue. We have to persevere. Hebrews 12:3, it says, "For consider him who has endured such hostility by sinners against himself, that you do not grow weary and lose heart." We have to fix our eyes on Jesus and persevere. It's easy for us to get bogged down and feel like, am I doing any good? Right? But we have to keep our eyes fixed on Him. He's the one that gives us energy for us to continue. Matthew 24, verses 10 through 13, it says, "At that time, many will fall away and betray one another and hate one another. Many false prophets will arise and will mislead many. Because lawlessness is increased, most people's love will grow cold. But the one who endures till the end will be saved." What does it mean for love to grow cold? Have you ever experienced that in your own life, or maybe love has grown cold in that? Yeah, compassion fades, passion for God dwindles, commitment to others weakens. People become indifferent, self-focused, or spiritually numb. And it's not an instant switch, it's a slow freeze. It's like a fire that's untended. The warmth of love gradually fades into apathy. And this happens when sin becomes normalized. We see that a lot in our society. Sin's fine, right? It's just normal. That's what everybody does. Our hearts get desensitized. People become cynical or self-protective in a broken world. Bitterness, offense, or disappointment chokes out love. How many of you experienced that? We let bitterness take root in our heart, and our love can grow cold. Busyness or distraction, we talked about that. Fear and distrust will override the grace and generosity. And then it says, "The one who endures till the end will be saved." This is a race of endurance. When things get hard, when we see the strength of we will see the strength of a relationship. We find out our true loyalty. When things aren't going well, that's when we find out, do we turn to God or do we turn on God? In this verse, if you want to throw that back up there, that Matthew 24:10 through 13. In this verse, the word endures there that it uses in verse 13. There's the Greek word for this, and I'm not fluent in Greek, so forgive me if I mispronounce this, but hupomeno. Can you say hupomeno? Hupomeno? It's kind of fun speaking Greek. This word in the Greek, it's a verb. It takes action. We have to go. So the Strong's definition of this is to remain, to have fortitude, to persevere, to abide, endure, to suffer, to tarry. This word's used multiple places throughout the New Testament. I'll give you a few different examples. Jesus actually used this exact same phrase earlier in chapter 10 of Matthew. In Matthew 22, it says, "You will be hated by all because of my name, but it is the one who endures to the end who will be saved." Again, Paul uses this in the context of being about the Father's business, in 2 Timothy 2:10, it says, "For this reason I endure all things for the sake of those who are chosen, so that they may obtain the salvation which is in Christ Jesus and with the eternal glory." He says, "I am enduring this for other people so they can experience the eternal life that is found only in Jesus Christ." We have to be on mission the same way. Sorry, I'm jumping around, Jamie. I'm all over the place here. I'm going to go back to 1 Corinthians 13:7. We had a series on love, and we talked about this verse, and it's actually part of the definition of love. It says, "Love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things." This endurance is an aspect of love. So when we live in love, we live in endurance. We live in fortitude. We live in that tarrying and continuing. So if you're still breathing, God's not done with you. Your purpose isn't over. We have to persevere. We have to not grow weary in what God's called us to do. Hebrews encourages us in chapter 10, verse 36 and 37. He says, "You need to persevere so that when you have done the will of God, you will receive what he has promised. For in just a little while, he who is coming will come and will not delay." Here's a promise at the end of this perseverance. It comes with great reward. When we persevere, he has a promise for us and a reward that we can't even truly comprehend. So we've been talking about this series of hope. We've talked about hope in Jesus, hope in heaven, all these things. There's a saying in the business world that says hope is not a strategy. If you're just hoping for success, it's not going to happen. You got to actually put a plan together. We can't just hope for Jesus. We got to get busy. We got to get ready. We need to get busy about building a relationship with Jesus, a deeper, more intimate relationship with Jesus. We got to get busy about getting our act together and surrendering and being obedient to him. We got to get busy about the Father's business, and we have to continue and endure that until the end. That is where the reward is. It's one thing to start, it's another thing to finish strong. People are searching for something to hope in, something to give them a purpose. There's a lot of people that want to be passionate about something. They want something that they can grasp to. There's all kinds of new movements happening all the time, and I hate to say it, a lot of times they're more passionate about their purpose than the church is about the mission of God. And it's a little bit embarrassing, to be honest, that they're out there and they're making a difference and they're sold out for that, and we have the true purpose. We have a true plan and purpose, and we have true joy and true peace, and we aren't that passionate about going and sharing it with other people. Let's be passionate about Jesus. Let's have faith that perseveres in hope. Let's share this with others so that they can experience the hope that's in Jesus, the excitement of his return, and the glory of heaven with us. Wishing and hoping without faith, love, and perseverance is just wishful thinking. We got to finish strong. So wherever you are in your race, maybe even if you're in the final miles, don't stop running. Don't stop running. Now's the time to finish strong. Finish strong in prayer, in service, in faith, in witness. You're closer than ever to the finish line, and your greatest testimony can still be ahead of you. There's many times, especially as we get older, that we think all the great things are behind us. But I'm telling you, God has more for you in the future than he does in the past. Let's look forward to that. There's so much more. We got my friend Ray out here, right? He's in his 80s. He's on fire for God, right? He's living for the Lord. God's not done with Ray, right? He's not done with any one of us. He's got a purpose, and the best things are ahead of us, not behind us. So don't feel like your big contributions are behind you. The greatest influence many times happens in the later years. You're mentoring, praying, encouraging, modeling faithfulness to younger generations. We want to be a multi-generational body here. And we look to all of you. We look to each and every one of us to be an example, an inspiration to the next generation. Yeah, that means like I said, I got teenagers. They do things a little differently than I do. That means I've got to figure them out. They don't need to figure me out. I need to be an example. I got to meet them where they're at so I can help lead them and guide them, not to my preference, but so they can have an encounter with God and figure out what that is and their relationship with God. But we have to have a focus and be open to the multi generations. So let's keep our eyes on the finish line and be found faithfully running when Jesus calls us home or returns in glory, because it's going to be a glorious day and it's something that we have to look forward to. But we have to be ready. We have to be ready. When he shows up, when he calls us home or returns in glory, we need to be busy about the Father's business. And we got to persevere through that, even when it seems difficult, even when it doesn't seem like we're making progress, even when there are things that are going on in our life that are really difficult and challenging. We got to keep our focus on Jesus and the mission that he's given for us. So as you go out this week, I encourage you, look for opportunities to share your testimony. Look for opportunities, because that's the most powerful way that you can witness to other people. There's two things in my mind that are powerful in a witness. One is how you live. Because if people see the love of Jesus in you, they're going to be attracted to that and they're going to say, I want what they have. What do they have that I don't have? Because they got joy when it doesn't make sense. They got peace when it doesn't make sense. They got love when it doesn't make sense. And I want that. I need that in my life. So actions speak louder than words. But the second thing is when you tell your personal testimony and you say, listen to what God's done in my life. This is where I was. This is where I got myself. But God showed up and he changed the whole story. And he wrote a whole new story in my life. We talked in that song, Blessed Assurance, right? It says, this is my story. This is my song. Yeah, God showed up. That's our story. We got to share that story with other people because God's got a story for them too. So this week, as you go out, look for opportunities to share that story with other people and just connect with them, love on them, because that's what the world needs. They want something to leave a legacy, and this is the only legacy that matters.